at HTTP and talked a little bit about request methods. Now that we've learned a little bit about HTML and we can do some basic things in App Engine, we're going to take a look at how we can actually take information from a user and communicate that back to the server. This is going to be a pretty critical thing that we'll need to do as we build more and more complex web applications. So a great question is, how do we make use of these request methods in our Flask applications? Like, what do we actually do with them? What do they mean? We know there's the get method that we use frequently and the post method that we use frequently, but what do we actually use those for in our applications? So when we build forms in HTML, the form is an HTML element that we often use to encapsulate all of the different form fields that we might want to send to the server. So in this form HTML element, we typically have a method. Here we can see that method is get, and then we have an action. So the action identifies where we're going to send all of these values. So what is the actual URL on the server that we're going to gather all this information and send to? Now for get request, we just want to set this method to get, and for post, we'll see that in just a moment. We're going to set that method to post. But you can see that there are a few input fields here. There's a text field named input field, and there's a number field named number field. So the naming isn't terribly creative, I will admit. But at the bottom we have a submit input type, and that's just going to allow us to press a button to actually execute this action. So, this is very, it happens sort of by steps. It's not something where the user enters some text into a field and automatically that gets sent to the server. There actually has to be some kind of action. Now, later in this class, we're going to get into how we might actually want to take real-time typing from a text field and send that to a user, or send that to the server. That's going to involve JavaScript and some other things. But for now, we're going to enter some information, hit submit, and then that's going to go off to the server. So when we do this, this is actually going to be included as part of the URL. So the user will enter something into input field, enter something in a number field, hit submit, and that's when everything gets gathered and sent to the server. So when a user submits your form, the values of the form fields are gathered, they're retrieved from the page, and then they're sent in the request as parameters. Now, on the server side, we're going to use flask.request to receive those parameters. So you can see here, flask.request.args is going to be just sort of a dictionary type of object where we're going to have a key, and the value of that is going to actually be what the user types. So if the user types ABCD, then param1 is now going to have the value on the server ABCD. And if the user typed 1234 into number field, then param2 is now going to have the value 1234. So we can retrieve these, and once they're in our Python code on the server, we can really do whatever we like with them. So we'll get into an example. We're going to explore that in just a moment, but for now, this is how we retrieve this. So Python and Flask do all the heavy work here. When we send to that particular URL, it's just going to call into this function with all of the request information already populated. So we'll take a look at that momentarily. Now, if we want to use a post request, it's very similar. Again, method equals post. Everything else is pretty much going to work the same way, except that when we submit a form and the method type is post, you won't see those values in the URL. So if you actually were to type in a URL directly and hit question mark and then a parameter name and equals parameter value and then an ampersand, your server is not really going to know the difference there. It's going to actually, it's just going to process that like it came from a normal form on a web page. But with post requests, you can't just type that into the URL. This is going to be included in that HTTP request body, so it won't actually come through on that URL. But for fields that we send via post requests in Flask, we retrieve those using flask.request.form, and then there's going to be the key here. Again, dictionary type object. We're going to have a key, and then param1 is going to receive that value. So here you can see we're actually guarding using this app route. So app route, and then we kind of identify that URL that we want to map to this function, and we're actually guarding against the GET request. So someone can't just open this, using a GET request. It has to retrieve a post or has to be a post request to actually even open this particular page. So if someone were to open this just directly, it wouldn't do anything. It would say that method's not allowed. So you can also, in Flask, easily treat parts of the URL path as parameters. So you might have used a website where you go to www.somewebsite.com / maybe your username, and then that's automatically mapped to a profile page. So this can be useful for that kind of approach. All we have to do here is in our app.route annotation, we take that path and then we use this it sort of actually looks like HTML elements. This angle bracket notation allows us to now supply those as parameters to our function, and now we can kind of treat those like an easy to use parameter for our page. So if this was some particular user or some particular maybe this is like a categorization of your website where this is some category, this is a subcategory, and then this is a page, you could use that to retrieve that information from whatever structures or data storage you might have in your web application. So this is a much, you don't have to retrieve anything this way. It just automatically maps that to the parameter, and it's a Python variable as soon as you use it. So we're going to take a look at some of these. We're going to explore these in our next video. We're actually going to have two videos up next. We're going to take a look at some of the things that we can do with these parameters. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll get back to it and explore an example soon.